Are you a fan of pro wrestling, comedy, and combat sports? Then we have the podcast for you because we cover that and much, much more.
Do you like to debate with your friends? Do we have the perfect segment for you? It's the 531, where we take any given subject, break it down to a top 5. From there, we debate it down to 3, and then into that number 1 spot.
If you want to get a hold of us, find us on our social medias. Search Working Fans Podcast on any major social media platform. And if you want to find the podcast, search for us on any major podcast platform, as well as YouTube.
Working Fans Podcast. We put in the work so you don't have to.
All right, everybody, it's the Working Fans Podcast with the man they call Dave and AJ Strangebrew, and we're talking the top male wrestlers of the year. And AJ, before we get started, why don't you tell people what you look for in your top wrestler of the year?
So for me, in top wrestler of the year, the title's a little deceiving. For me, top wrestler of the year is all around most successful. How have you evolved? What you've done this year and brought to the product in which you're a part of. I don't think it's fair to judge people necessarily based on the level of federation that they're in, but you have to a point. It's not fair to say that the person who's wrestling in front of 300 people, even though they had a great year, is the same as the person wrestling in front of 80,000 and having that pressure on them.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, we're also talking about, as much as we like pro wrestling and we respect pro wrestlers and we talk about the legitimacy of it and people don't give it respect, we are talking about a predetermined entertainment thing the same well. So it's almost hard to say, well, this guy had a much better year. Well, there's a reason for that.
No, there is better years.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
And some of that, and you are in those positions most of the time because you're good.
I love Dolph Ziggler. Dolph Ziggler is a great wrestler. He can do everything in the ring. Dolph Ziggler had a shitty ass year.
Yeah. I'm going to give you my list actually to start this, and I'll explain. Like, I got Bryan Danielson, Kenny Omega, Roman Reigns. Those 3 are going to be on a lot of people's list. I got Hangman Page. And then my final 2, when I was thinking about it, I went with Nick Aldis and Walter. Now, both dropped their titles this year, but if you look at it, both had like historically long range in the business. Both put on excellent matches. Yeah, I know COVID also played a factor in some of that, but in the case especially of Aldis, he was champ for a while.
So I absolutely love Nick Aldis, but I can't say that he had a great year because how many matches did he wrestle this year?
I mean, that's a good point. I'd have to go back and I'd have to look.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There were 5 great matches.
I think he had more than that. I mean, he was around, but then the thing is, Aldis also.
But how do you knock off? And we can debate this later. But how do you knock off somebody like Okada for Aldis when Aldis wrestled like 10 times?
Well, Okada was injured, and I think for some of the year, and Okada wasn't in the main because if you look at some of the people we got,
but I think he still worked more than Aldis did.
If you're looking at, we have some New Japan people on this list, and
what about Bobby Lashley?
Bobby Lashley
compared to Nick Aldis.
But let's get to some of our list here. Let's start off with Scott from Voluntown. He's got Bryan Danielson, and from New Japan, he's got Shingo Takagi, who's IWGP champ currently.
Absolutely.
Bill Ospreay, Kota Ibushi, who actually got injured and
missed part of the year also.
Was having hell of a matches, and then he's got Jonathan Grisham. Now, Jonathan Gresham, is one of those guys who was pure champion for a while and was putting on fantastic matches and basically rewriting the book on what it is to be a pure wrestler.
I love Jonathan Gresham. I'm hoping that he lands somewhere where we can see more of him. We got to see him in the Northeast because he's on Ring of Honor TV. Some people blame him for what's going on with Ring of Honor. It's fine. I don't. I personally think he was carrying it. It's fine.
I don't know what's blaming him. I think I guess the rumors there. I mean, maybe you don't like him because he's a little shorter. I know how you are.
I like him. He got good, thick legs.
He does have some big legs. You would
Yeah,
like
he
him.
works a strong style. I like Jonathan Gresham. We saw him actually sport.
He's a technical wizard.
Yeah, but we saw him live at Bloodsport. He was fantastic.
Yeah, Jonathan Gresham is one of the best.
I don't know if he was wrestler of the year, but yeah.
Oh, it's in the top five. It's in the top five. And actually, if you're talking about just the wrestling part, he's up there. He's as good as anybody.
But the problem is like we said before, for me, I look at it more as a total package.
Okay. Well,
I have guys on my list who aren't favorites of mine because they had such a good year.
yeah, actually, if you look at Scott's list too, a lot of these guys, I mean, Danielson, Takagi.
Well, we love Scott,
they're
but Scott,
great wrestlers.
we love Scott. Scott's the man. Scott is awesome. I agree with Scott's list when it comes to wrestlers. However, Scott hates the WWE.
Well, that's true.
You will not see a person from the WWE, no matter how good of a year they have, on Scott's list.
And that's fine. I mean, although Bryan Danielson is technically in both.
He's
but
in AEW, and we both know that the reason why he's made the list is because of the wrestling that he's done in AEW, not because of what he did early in the year in the WWE.
But Scott is also aware of what happened with WWE with Danielson. And we'll get to
Of course, he's aware. He's aware of it, but he's not aware of the development of Roman Reigns over the last year.
He is. But to be fair, and I'll say this to Scott, he takes himself out of that. He's told me plenty of times, I can't comment on WWE stuff. So
yeah, which I get, but what I'm saying is that his list will never have those guys on it.
Yeah, maybe not completely, no. And that's fine. And that's why we like to get this variety.
No, absolutely.
I got Jake here. Jake doesn't have a WWE guy. Now, Jake also, I think, misunderstood me. Okay, so next week's list.
Jake's also got 12 guys, which is impressive.
He's got 6. But Jake, next week coming up, because I asked everybody, give me your top male and female wrestlers of the year.
He sent you both.
I realized he sent me a list of 6, and one of them is Britt Baker. So he took it, I think, as male or female.
In fairness, she has taken the spot of MJF. So
yes, we'll talk a little bit about that too. We're recording this after Wednesday's Dynamite when Punk and MJF had a hell of a program.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that because that was amazing.
Yeah. So now, all right, for Jake's list, Jake rule in effect. Now, see, here you go. I love me some Jake, right? But in his one of his extra guys, Minoru Suzuki. Minoru Suzuki, hell of a wrestler. Argued he went to a ton of places. Impact, GCW, argument. But he wouldn't make my wrestler of the year too because, again, I'm looking at also guys who were kind of in a main event status. Now, that being said, that's not how I word this, but I think me and you kind of think like that a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, all right, next, John Moxley. Okay, no argument there. Moxley belongs. Hangman Page, no argument again. You could argue that, he didn't have the year of Omega.
I can argue both of those guys. I'll tell you why. One, Moxley actually this year was nowhere near last year. He got relegated out of the world title. He was not really a top contender for it and then was battling demons. And you got Hangman Page, who until he won the belt had taken off about 3/4 of the year. So, yeah, I can argue both of those.
Got a baby. My point is, I understand if somebody puts them in there. They're
absolutely.
Yeah.
I understand people don't pay attention also.
Shingo Takagi also on this list. IWGP champion. And Kenny Omega. All right. I got another list coming up from Chester, New Hampshire. Let's take a break for a second here. I want to talk about some people because I did my list first. All right. I didn't go in why I had some of these people in. To me, the top 3 guys that are really we're looking at here are Omega, Roman Reigns, and Bryan Danielson. And I will get, I'll ask you your list right after this. Sure. Because Bryan Danielson was in 2 companies this year. He was in WWE and he was in AEW. The 2 top companies in North America. That's not disputed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in terms of, overall success and where everybody gets to see. All right. So Bryan Danielson was in the main event of WrestleMania. He had a hell of a match with Roman Reigns and Edge. He had a hell of a match with Roman, and he was great. I want to say an Elimination Chamber too. Now,
100%.
100%. Here's what Bryan Danielson did too. He took a career in WWE that I know some hardcore fans, even though they love him, might not give him credit for. And he was amazing in WWE, and he's even better now. Like it's incredible.
Yeah, okay. So Bryan Danielson's going to make my list also when we get to my list. The reason why is he's evolved. He's evolved back into a better version of the American Dragon.
Yeah.
If you watched him early on in Ring of Honor, what he's doing now is very similar to the character, except for he's gotten better on the mic.
Yes.
So he's even more poignant now when he actually does it and when he actually attacks people. He comes across as very snarky, very, no. I understand. You're lazy. It's fine.
Right. Yeah. He's very good at getting heat and being a heel. He was good then too, but he's another level now.
Well, I think it means even more now because of how much people want to love him. When you want to love, it's like a dog. When you want to love the dog and the dog keeps biting you, it means a little bit more.
I'm going to tell you how smart this guy is, and this is just my opinion on what he does. He knows the audience, and he knows he loves this kind of wrestling. He loves that there's no limits. At the same time, he had a good relationship with WWE, and he knows that we're dealing with a tribal type atmosphere right now online when people are either pro WWE or pro AEW. So what does he do? He takes these little WWE jabs because now he wants to be a heel, but he's not changing anything about himself. But he starts mentioning them like, I defended my belt after
WrestleMania. Yeah.
And then even takes that line which he was doing when he was doing the vegan heel champ thing, and like, I never changed, you changed. And there's a word for that, fickle. And I'm not fickle. Exact same. He knows how to do it, but he's putting it's excellent.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, we all know Bryan Danielson is a genius. Mm-hmm. Anybody who can look like a little troll and land Brie Bella, he's obviously incredibly intelligent.
That's how to sell. Listen, I want two other guys I want to go back to. We'll talk about it, and we'll get back to the list. I know we're kind of deviating a little bit here, but that's fine. It's our fucking show. So
we do what we want.
Kenny Omega, all right, and Roman Reigns. Those are the two other guys I want to talk about. For me, Kenny Omega, okay, fantastic wrestler. But when we're talking about guys who did things on a level of success, we're talking about, here's a guy, he did something I don't remember anybody doing, just going around collecting belts. Not since Ultimate Dragon, but he's doing it at.
Well, he also what we talked about with Bryan Danielson in the American Dragon, he did the same thing. He took that cleaner gimmick out of the closet, said, let me dust this off real quick and let me put it back on. And he absolutely did freaking awesome with it.
He was great as a heel all year. He had fantastic matches, despite the fact this guy had two soldiers that were bothering him right now. And he went down to AAA and won the Mega AAA championship.
I think people are too hard on Kenny Omega. I think that a lot of times, because of the level of match that he can have, they expect him to just have that 5-star, 10-star, 20-star match every time. And that's impossible. And some matches are different. He's not going out there and wrestling a style like the Bucks, for Christ's sakes. He has a much more hard-hitting style, and he gets hit hard. So it's much harder to do that every night.
And the last guy I want to talk about before we get back to this list, to your credit, talking about WWE guys, we do have to acknowledge him. He is the guy. Because when you're talking about guys that are just successful, and obviously he's got the machine behind him, so you could argue with me, go, oh, it's a predetermined, like I just said. And here's the thing, he deserves that spot.
Yeah, but how many times has the machine been behind people and it doesn't mean a goddamn thing? Even Roman Reigns in his own freaking career, how many times was the machine behind him and the crowd did the complete opposite of what they wanted?
Yeah. There's an interview out right now with Paul Heyman and Ariel Helwani. It's brilliant. And Heyman talks about how important they are together as a package, because Helwani asked him, he said, don't be modest. How important are you? And he said, it's not just me on, out there. It's the behind the scenes. We challenge each other to be better, and it shows. So you might as well put Paul right there. It's all part of
absolutely.
It's Paul. It's the Usos. It's Roman. It's just the way.
But who has ever doubted how important Paul is to this situation?
Yeah, I don't know.
Even I don't know if you watched SmackDown or not last night.
I haven't.
We're taping this the day after, but the way he digs in on everybody in that show too, and builds up for the end of the show is absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he knows what he's doing. When he talks about, he's that guy that he's out there, he's doing everything he's going to say he's going to do, and then he rubs your nose in it. He literally beat Danielson and Edge at Mania and ended up, even though it was a great match back and forth, he finished the match by stacking them on top of each other and pinned them. And then he goes and brags about it, how he smashed them both. And he says, we can't even have triple threat matches no more because I'm just going to embarrass people. So they can't even do this. It's like unbelievable. Hell of a trash talker. They're finally letting him be him this past year and a half. And it's box office.
His timing on the mic has gotten so good. The way he holds things, the way he gives that little smirk before he says something, like I'm making myself laugh before I even say this. It's just genuine heel. And I know a thing or two about being a genuine heel. But he's killing it.
Now, although some would say you're lucky, but that's beside the point. Anyway, let's move on. We got Jesse from New Hampshire. He's got Sammy Guevara, Eddie Kingston, CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, and Roman Reigns, the three you just mentioned. Okay, let's talk about some of these other guys here real quick. Why are and I'm not saying they won't make your list, but why are we not going to have, let's say, some of these other guys in our top three here?
CM Punk's not going to make my list, and the reason why is not because he's not having a good year. He's obviously having a good comeback here, but he hasn't done what he's going to do yet. Mm-hmm. He's not hitting that big spotlight. Now, is he starting to hit it now with MJF, with the interviews, with what's going on here? Is this the build finally to something bigger? And I shouldn't say finally because it hasn't been that long.
Right.
But this is the build to something now. Up until now, he's just been getting over guys that are relatively new to the company, guys who needed that little bit of stroke to them. And I think he's doing a great job with it. But he's not going to make my list for top 5 because it hasn't been his year yet.
Now, and I would say here's where maybe me and you, we do count how the company pushes you. And if you weren't to take that in consideration, you could argue that Kingston and Guevara should be there in terms of Guevara with the work in the ring and Kingston just all around.
Well, first of all, Kofi Kingston hasn't done shit.
I'm talking about Eddie
I
Kingston.
know who you're talking about. But both of them, Guevara is fantastic. He gets a push there, and he does get a push from the company, but they're taking their time with that push.
They should.
And they should, because he's still very young. He's still developing, and he is doing a great job of learning that. Jungle Boy could be in that conversation. You want to talk about people that have just gotten over who it might not necessarily be their year yet compared to the top 5. But if you're having a conversation for just great years, how do you leave Jungle Boy out of there?
I'll say this too. I think me and AJ are both kind of marked for the belts. And I will say this, when me and AJ do look at the finals, usually we are looking at your prospective world heavyweight champion.
The belt does mean something.
To me, it does too.
Dude, okay, like you talked about before, it's not a contest to actually win the belt, but it is. It is a contest. Right. If they don't feel you're putting asses in the seats, guess what? You're not wearing the belt.
Right. You have to connect.
I mean, unless we're talking about like the Intercontinental or United States Championship, which doesn't.
We're talking about the world title.
Yeah.
Right. All right. I'm going to go to Randy Osgood. He's got Kenny Omega, Bryan Danielson, Josh Alexander had a good year. Roman Reigns and Bobby Lashley and Shingo Takagi. Shingo Takagi, I want to say, other than Danielson, Omega, and Roman, is probably making the next few lists, but he's had a hell of a year.
Absolutely. He's had a great year. That's and good list by friend of the show, Randy Osgood.
Now let's go right into Mike Flynn, who's got, here we go again, Omega, Shingo, Roman, Ibushi, and McIntyre. Now, Mike Flynn, I'm going to give
McIntyre.
You know what? It was
what did he do this year? Other than make me change the channel on whatever program he's on, what did he do this year?
I mean, he was in the thick of things for a while with Lashley. He didn't win the title. He didn't end up with the belt this year.
I'm just saying, what did he actually just any accomplishment. Oh, did he headline WrestleMania?
No.
Did he win the Royal Rumble?
No, that was all last year.
Did he win any major belts?
That was all last year.
I mean, I'm just asking.
I get it. That's all subjective. Now, here's the thing. I will say this. I want to give Mike Flynn some props, though, because you talked about this. One thing about Mike Flynn, out of everybody that writes us a list that I know, like personally a little bit, this guy watches WWE, AEW, and New Japan.
Yeah, he watches everything. Mike Flynn's a good guy.
He's a good guy. And
other than that pick of Drew McIntyre, he did a great job.
Well, it's his pick. Out. Former guest of the show, wrestler Mike Caldwell. He sent us a list too.
If he only picked himself.
He did not. Now, he's more of a heavy WWE guy. But, to be fair, here's his list, though. Bobby Lashley, Bryan Danielson, Roman Reigns, still picked Kenny Omega, because goddamn it, he deserves it. And no one else has picked this guy yet, but, I think because he's just coming on now, but Big E.
Big E deserves it.
Big E, I don't have Roman.
He struggled in the beginning of the year because, they gave him shit matches and shit opponents. But he did very well as the year turned on, and over the last 4 months, he's been fantastic.
Now, I think I said in my list in the beginning, I talked about Aldous Walter, I talked about Bryan, Omega, Roman, but I also did have Hangman on that list as well. I did the two.
I shit on your Aldous pick, but other than that, you were good.
Now, who do you have as your list? I'm
just
going to say
Bryan.
Yeah.
I do have Bobby Lashley on me. To me, the way he dominated throughout most of the year, how do you not have Bobby Lashley on your list? I've got Shingo also on my list. So there's another one for Shingo. Kenny Omega's made my list because he held the belt 99% of the year, and he just continues to evolve and be fantastic. Bryan Danielson or American Dragon, he is actually on my list also because, once again, the evolution and what he has done as a heel, I mean, they want to cheer him. And he's basically saying, no, you're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. And then Roman Reigns is my last spot. Roman Reigns, we talk about evolution. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, we sat there and went, why do they keep shoving this baby face down our throats? Why do they keep doing this? Him as a heel is absolutely electrifying. He's been fantastic. He's one of the best stories to me in WWE over the last 20 years, just because the way he's found himself. I hate to talk about this comparison, but he's finally getting to the stature where he can say that maybe The Rock's not the head of the table.
And we might find that out soon enough.
I do. Hey, I'm not going to pull the Jake effect because I think that's wrong. But if you want to see somebody who's evolved also over the last year, he's not in my top 5, but he's definitely evolved. Well, Seth Rollins has been absolutely fantastic too with the evolution of this character.
Now, yeah, that's fine. I have to say though, I kept a little track this week. Interesting enough, Shingo, Honorable mentioned, he got 4 of the people voting. He was right there. But
I voted for him too.
The top 3 people on the list are the people I'm talking about, and I kind of knew it was going to be this way.
Roman Reigns, Bryan Danielson, and Kenny Omega.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. Okay, before we get started in this discussion, I think we're going to agree, based on our love for belts and based on the fact that we go off pushes a little bit, we're going to have to get rid of Danielson first, even though I think he's the best wrestler out of the 3, and that's not a slight on him.
Well, he also didn't wrestle a lot of the year. I mean, from WrestleMania and then
right, yeah.
Well, that's why Hangman Page didn't make my list. Right. I love Hangman Page. I don't want people to think I'm slighting him.
By the way, if this list was just best wrestling ability, Bryan Danielson's probably our number 1.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But then we got to put there'd be him, Jonathan Gresham, and Daniel Garcia, for Christ's sake.
Ospreay. There's gonna be a lot of people. But it'd be a completely different list. So that being said, when we're talking about success for a lot of the years, it was 2 guys. It was Roman and it was Omega. Now, I think we had this discussion last year when we did a year end. And I think I went with Kenny Omega because Kenny Omega was the first guy I ever saw just unify the belts. And
I think we're going to end up agreeing here.
I think we are. And I think our fans aren't going to necessarily be happy, but
they are not going to. I don't think our fans are going to be happy at all.
Because here's the difference right now. Kenny needs some time off. God bless him. The kind of work he did. But it's the whole deal. There ain't a bigger fucking main event right now than Roman Reigns. And I want to pull up this stat I recently saw somewhere. I'm sorry, Producer Joe. I don't remember. I'm blanking out now, but people can look it up. If I'm wrong, fuck it. Roman Reigns was on the Tonight Show recently, and I want to say there was like several extra 100,000 people tuned in to that episode of Tonight Show. The guy's a draw. I mean, even though WWE rankings are like the people that are tuning in, it's because of Roman. Like Roman is the last really big star, other than maybe Brock or Cena or somebody like that, who's a part-timer at this point. But Roman's out there every week.
People are definitely tuning in. I mean, if you don't think that they're changing the channel to watch Roman Reigns, you're out of your mind. That's which is funny because he wasn't doing that on Raw. It wasn't until he developed this character and really polished it on SmackDown that he's finally doing it.
And again, once he went to SmackDown, though, that's the first time he became heel. And that's also when Paul Heyman joined. So it was all that came together. And now, God, they waited forever to turn him heel. But you could see, like, this was the way to do it. And I think Paul and everything, it's like, look, Kenny is so great. And what's really great about Kenny, too, is he's great on a show that has a lot of great things.
Absolutely.
Roman is the best on a show that maybe doesn't have a lot of great things, but he is that damn good. And he would be that good in AEW. He'd be that good in New Japan. Wherever you put this guy, he's a star.
Roman Reigns is the reason why I tune into SmackDown on Friday nights.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, I know something's going to be a polarizing topic. Agree, disagree, get the topics, but I'll tell you
there is one thing that I think they also did very well with him. When him and Seth Rollins were on the same brand, they did a good job of constantly having them near each other without actually doing anything. And I think that built even more anticipation. And then moving Seth back over to Monday Night Raw, once again, building even more anticipation so that one eventually when they do get their hands on each other, it's going to be quite the entertaining thing.
You know what? We teased it. So before I get out of here, we will talk a little about this. CM Punk, MJF, as we're recording this, there'll probably be another episode of Dynamite when you guys hear this, but we're coming off that promo exchange. That's one of the best promo. You could argue it went a little long, but my God, the zingers and the way they kept the audience into it. And
I love the way CM Punk stayed quiet.
Mm-hmm.
He let MJF just ramble and talk and get on his zingers and get on his stuff, and then he brought fire back at him. And he went a little humorous the first time.
Right.
Then he let MJF go again. Right. And when he came back in the next one, it was more, I'm going to kick your ass.
Right. It was, you're going to make the New York Times again for the obituaries.
Yeah.
And I love that part too. I know what you're saying there. When he brought it back to like, okay, this is a real fight. You know, we're going to make this actually an intense. It's not going to just be cutesy lines and stuff like that. And it was almost like, I heard this on, I want to say post wrestling. It was almost like a rap battle type thing where they kept taking turns. They would let the other person be quiet, and then they would shoot back. And everybody.
I also like that nobody else was involved in it. There was no Wardlow there. There was no Shawn Spears there. No FTR. It was really just the two of them, two great guys on the mic, and dropping bombs.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Punk made it more serious to his credit.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I'm trying to think if there's anything else going on in wrestling business you want to talk about right now.
Really, that was the big thing this week. I mean, Brock Lesnar is coming back. That was brought in at the end of the show last night. I know you haven't watched SmackDown yet,
right,
but Brock will be back next week. Also, they made Sami Zayn the #1 contender by winning the Battle Royal to Roman Reigns.
That should be interesting.
How interesting is that Sami Zayn is now your number one contender
Yeah.
to the Universal Champion?
I like Sammy. He ain't winning the belt, but I like him. It should be fun. Actually,
Well, he's also such a heel.
they cut a little angle on Rampage last night where, speaking of Sammy's, Sammy Guevara will be taking on Tony Nese.
Yes.
This week. Tony Nese. Tony Nese to me is a guy, much like 2.0. Like, oh my God, he's got to be so happy he jumped ship. Like, like he's getting like a decent sized push from where he was to where he is right now.
Oh, absolutely. And he's one of those guys who really is what they talk about. Though when they talk about him being the ultimate athlete, he really is that athletic and that talented. And I thought he was good on the mic when he first came to the cruiserweights. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, and maybe it's his height, the WWE just chose not to use him.
Yeah. He never got that full level success. He got labeled as just a cruiserweight, I think. And had credit to AEW. Like Bobby Fish is doing well. We saw him and Cole get the win last night. Bobby Fish even scored the big it
was nice to see them not go. I mean, it's nice to see them not completely job out Bobby Fish 1 week.
Yes. I think Bobby's been doing well, but yeah, he's had he's won some, lost some, but he seems to be in the thick of things. He's with Adam Cole. We'll see where that's going.
Those guys are very talented. Some would even say it's undisputed.
Undisputed. A lot of good stuff in wrestling. Bryan Danielson, we already talked about earlier. We were talking about the list, but he was great with the thing where beating up Colt Cabana and then him and Hangman getting into it. That was probably the second best thing on that show, I would say. Yeah,
I enjoyed that. I like that Bryan Danielson said that he's that there's a couple people from Atlanta that are, yeah. Well, Anna Jay sent down a tweet that actually said, "I'm from Atlanta."
Yeah, we could do this. Yeah, good on her. That won't be happening.
However, let me tell you who's not that smart. Julia Hart responded to Anna Jay's tweet with, "Hey, I'm from Atlanta too."
Cool. No one was talking about you, Julia. I hope you do well. You seem like a nice person. You're not in this angle. That's funny. Whatever.
Wait.
I'm not gonna
for her.
I like it. But so a lot of good stuff in wrestling, and most of it is around AEW. That being said, when it comes to again, and by the way, guys, you voted it too. The people I talked to, you had it tied at 3. If only one of you picked Roman Reigns, and it was a lot more people, then maybe me and AJ would be like, all right, well, that's not what we see, but we go, all right, whatever. But when you all voted down and you put it down to me and him, we're going to pick who we think belongs.
Oh, and guys, don't get me wrong. You guys are entitled to your opinion. You're just wrong.
And it was, again, we do take it into consideration because it was in the top 3. The guys were tied. So Omega, Bryan, Danielson, and Roman Reigns. That's what I would have for a top 3.
I'm also glad to see Dave was actually right for once and agreed with me.
Very good. All right, folks. On that note, I think it's time we end this show. I can't do this anymore. It's the Working Fans Podcast.
Remember, guys, we do the work. So
fans, welcome to the Working Fans Podcast. We are excited today. We got the mighty Scott Chaplain. You can find him, Scott Chaplain, on Facebook, at Scott_Chaplain on Instagram and Twitter, and go to patreon.com/WrestleRoast to get the best wrestling Patreon in the game. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm very good. Very, very good. How are you two?
Good, man. Good. Thanks
we're doing excellent.
Same. Now, where are you guys living? Like, where are you located?
We're in Connecticut.
Oh, okay. Hell yeah.
Where are you from?
I've driven through there to get to places that I rather be.
Yeah, that is definitely Connecticut.
Yeah,
did you drive through Connecticut to get to the AEW show in Boston? I gotta ask.
Oh, I didn't go to Boston.
Oh wow, Dave was actually there this week, and
really,
it did. Yeah.
Oh, that is fantastic, man. You loved it.
Yeah, it was a good time actually. So the match that's going to air tonight, when we're recording this on Rampage, Kingston and Danielson. Absolutely one of those like beat your ass all Japan style matches, and it was so good that Seidel and Dante followed it up, and the crowd was bored.
I heard they didn't do as much high flying or something.
It did, but it was, I think, partly too, they were coming off that Danielson Kingston high, that those guys were in a bad position. So.
How was the? I read again. We didn't see it yet, me or Joe, because it hasn't aired yet for us while we're recording. But how was the Punk Kingston thing?
I like that. Now, from where we were sitting, it's one of those things where, live, you don't get the backstage segments as good. But from what I saw, it was really well done. And I'm really curious to see where they're going with Kingston as a character. Because I've been thinking they've kind of been hitting at Mox as a heel a little bit.
Oh, Mox is a heel for sure, yeah.
Yeah, like when he dropped Yuta a couple weeks ago and then he beats up 10, I'm like, eh. And so I thought, oh, maybe Kingston's going to still be babyface. But now I'm thinking, I guess I can say it because people are going to see the match before this airs. But there's a little thing at the end of Kingston and Danielson where Kingston refuses to shake Danielson's hand. And then he gets into that argument with Punk. So I'm like, this feels like a definite heel turn for him too then.
Did you hear what the argument? My issue is, what is the argument? Because how is Eddie Kingston a heel against a guy who just came back? Like, the whole idea is Eddie's been struggling and dying. So how do you boo him? And also, he gets cheered more than almost anybody.
Absolutely. And even in the crowd, at least where we're sitting, I don't know how it will come off on TV tonight, but there were more people or equal cheering for Kingston over Danielson. And Danielson is one of the most popular guys.
Isn't it crazy that if it was WWE, you know how it would sound because they would literally edit your audio? Oh, yeah.
1,000%. And actually, even in Punk Fish, you could hear Bobby Fish chants there.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Yeah. So
that's one of the best things about AEW is you're getting presented the stars that you like in a way that you like them. There's been a few misses here and there, but for the most part, the returns have been amazing, and just the storylines they've built out of it have been great.
Well, and even the bad stuff, it's almost more forgivable because there's this feeling of the wrestler had a lot to do with it, and so you're also seeing it through their lens and maybe what their intention, as opposed to some phantom writer or going oh, Vince thought of this 30 minutes before the show. You're actually seeing how each wrestler's brain works within their storylines. So it's like if you're genuinely into music, you want to look into it more and figure out why they did the thing. And with this, you can find out just because you're a fan of the wrestler, because that is the wrestler. That's what they're presenting. At least that's what it seems like.
Yeah.
Unless Tony Khan is completely changing people's ideas, which it doesn't seem that way.
No, I was going to say too, with WWE, it's you have a ton of talented people there, but they're all kind of trained for the most part to do one thing, one style. Whereas AEW, you have all these talented people, but everybody's doing kind of their own thing, like you said. And it's okay. You can tell, a great example would be Jim Ross was probably not a big fan of the Elite. Dark, when you just hear protons, you can see the anger in his voice. But it's fine. Nobody cares. They're doing that, and there's still a match later in the show, like I said, with Danielson, because there's something for everybody with this.
Yeah. I went to Double or Nothing, the first one in Vegas, and so that was their first pay-per-view. And even on that first show, there was this feeling of, oh, this is a world's worth of wrestlers coming together and showing off their individual styles. We got everything we wanted in that show, and it was the first time in so long I saw that happen.
Yeah, even Dark is getting interesting because with Dark Elevation, at least, you're getting a lot of the Japanese female wrestlers on that show. And it's you're getting all these different, they're teaming up with different independent people, and they're having these different tag matches and stuff like that. And I love the fact that it's just not structured, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't, people go, oh, they mention people like Mike Lawrence, a guy who's on the podcast with me. I know he was a guest on your show. A big issue with him is he doesn't want to watch those things. And so when they go, this guy's 9-0, and it's well, I've never seen him wrestle once. They told you it. You don't need to see him wrestle. They told that's like anything. You've never seen, certain football players, all of their games, but they fill you in. They fill you in on what's going on. I think that's completely fine.
And that's one thing I've liked about AEW, how they have the Dark and the Elevation, where you can see these up and coming stars. You can see these matches that wouldn't necessarily be on TV. And it's almost like as if you're watching like Lord of the Rings or something, and you know there's a backstory. AEW is giving you that backstory to watch and see how these guys progress. And I've personally liked that the best.
And Scott, to piggyback off what you said a little bit too about like you don't have to watch it, they're telling you about it. I was just telling somebody the other day, they're asking me like they like some of the Marvel movies, but they hadn't watched all of them. And they're like, do I have to watch all of them? I'm like, you don't have to, but if you do, you're going to get rewarded for paying attention. I was like, so there's that. Sure. And that's what I think, you know, in AEW Dark and Elevation, all that too.
Yeah, I agree. Good
so
shit.
Scott, I'm going to ask you, we're kind of just getting into wrestling talk. So what, like your fandom, like who hooked you in pro wrestling?
Man, Stone Cold Steve Austin. First man I saw, it felt like he could handle his liquor, you know? I was like a little boy. My father was an alcoholic. And to see this rebellious person that reminded me a lot of my father, but none of the negatives was really exciting to me. It was partially that. Also, I was immediately into the dirt sheets. Like I remember being 9 years old and I would print out SmackDown results every Wednesday morning and bring them to school and just like read them to myself. And, you know, it was in grade school. I just liked the whole behind the scenes of it. I liked how it was put together and guys' ideas, and you just fall into a world, you know, it becomes more than just what you're watching on television. And I was into that.
Now, did you meet anybody that you knew that could equal that kind of fandom, like friend-wise? Because you've got some friends, and Dave's talked about it before, that they know of wrestling, but then you know people that are like, oh, man, I read the dirt sheet, and this guy is coming from this territory. Like, did you meet anyone else that was as dedicated a fan as you at that time?
In my hometown, no. Honestly, no. I remember there was kids I wouldn't usually hang out with at all, but since they liked wrestling, I gave them a shot. And then it would never work out. Right there. Yeah, it never worked out. There was like 5 kids that I tried to be friends with over wrestling, but it just was not computing, you know? And then there's also those guys who really like wrestling, and you start talking. I got a friend, dude, Monroe Martin, he's a comic. He loves pro wrestling, but when you talk to him about it, he loves it in the way a child loves it. And so you can't even talk about it like the way a fucking Mark would talk about it. He just loves any of it. Like, no matter what shit they throw down your throat, he just thinks it's so amazing that they do it, even if it's a repeat every week, you know?
Wow, so he'll watch Raw and be like, did you see Raw last night? Did you see what they did? And you're like, yeah, I slept through half of it, and I kind of woke up during a match I thought I might like.
Yeah, he gets a kick out of it. He sees it like, you know, the way people see the circuit.
God bless him, though. Man, fuck, I can't do that.
No, for sure.
And I found even like, I watched a lot of wrestling, but then when you start a podcast about wrestling, it's almost like, God, I feel like I'm so much deeper in, or I've got to know so much more.
Now, for the most part, like I avoid WWE almost completely. I just read results, you know, and with Twitter now, you see the highlights anyway of things, and you can get an idea of what's what, you know. It's like when you're a fan long enough, you become, it's like, I assume doctors don't have to read entire sheets of things to get the gist of something, you know, like you go, I know exactly what that was like. I do watch AEW, but I don't always watch it live. I'll wake up early and watch it. And I try not to, like, the pandemic really got me into evolving my life around when wrestling was on. Cause what else are you going to do? You know, and we were doing the podcast. So why not focus on it? And that got hellish quick. So, yeah.
Now, speaking of hellish, have you ever tried keeping up with the G1? Because I've wanted to do it every year. And then 2 days in, I'm like, fuck this. You guys are throwing too much at me at once. And then you're going to end on Shibata Sabre? Like, I don't have time enough in the day for this.
Yeah. Well, man, I mean, so the way I am able to watch it is I wake up at 5 a.m. for work anyway. And so usually the shows start at 4:30 or 5. And so you can miss the first few matches anyway because it's, young lion shit or, 8-man tags or whatever. So I watched almost all of the G1, but I'm literally driving to work, looking down here and there,
Exactly what you mean.
Like, thank God for English commentary, because a lot of times it's like I'm doing something early in the morning, and if they don't release one of the shows with English commentary, there's more likely a chance I'm going to die in a car crash because I'm looking down to see the action more.
Dude, these guys give me shit all the time because I drive a truck for a living. I drive a box truck, and
there we go. Yeah.
I got wrestling on all the time in the morning. That's how I keep up with everything. It's just like
because he can't stay up for it, so it's like he'll be watching Dynamite the next morning.
Yeah, that's what I did Thursday morning. I watched Dynamite on the way to work, and the first few moments of work, I
just watch stuff that revolves around my schedule sometimes. Like I started watching SmackDown now recently, not because I'm glued to the show. It's just on when I'm up. I'm working and I have it on in the background, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like that sucks.
Dude,
but
New Japan, something so nice about being up. Nobody else is awake. But you are, and these people are in Japan, there's something really cool about it. And it's like, it's the only present thing outside of yourself that happens that early in the morning. Like, who else are you going to communicate with? Nothing else is live. It's just, everything's bullshit. Even the radio at 5 a.m, it's like religious stations or something,
Yeah. Now, I was working a different job when Wrestle Kingdom was on this year, and I was working overnight. So I did an overnight inventory. And as I'm counting, I just had my iPad set up right there with all the matches. And I'm like, where else can you see this? Like,
yeah, it feels like a treat. I imagine it's what soccer fans feel like. And part of the reason it becomes a rabid thing. Because you start adjusting your schedule. There's like an intimacy. Most people wouldn't do that, and then so you get amped up.
I'm super
New
jealous.
Japan is just delivering such good content that it's like it's worth getting up at that time to be rewarded with just killer matches, even on your base level shows.
And then also, if you're really into it, it becomes or I don't see it, and then I have to avoid Twitter and Instagram all day because every account I follow is gonna mention whatever happened.
Yeah,
that kills me. That messes me up a lot. Where I forget that I missed a show in the morning, and then I go on Instagram and it's like, what? The tag titles switched hands? Why? What? Yeah,
I definitely had to do that a few Dynamites and stuff before too, where I'm like, same. I'm going to bed at 9. I'll be up at 2:30 in the morning. Let's just put it on. I'm super jealous of West Coast people too. Like, I also watch like a lot of MMA, and like I'd be up to like 1 a.m. sometimes. Some of these fight cards would end, and like we went to Vegas one time, and like, holy shit, it's 10 o'clock. This thing's finishing. It's like
daytime. I know.
Yeah,
so strange.
It's fucking nuts. But
but also their cities shut down earlier. Like those places also, it's just life. Ends earlier.
Now, you were saying you were an Austin fan, and he drew you in too. What time period, like, because I'm thinking like Austin Brett, maybe 97, maybe a little before. Okay.
So it was probably well, I was a huge fan by the time WrestleMania 17 came around, and that was what, 2001 or 2000? That was 2001.
It's 2001, yep.
So probably 15, WrestleMania 15 I got into it. And then when Austin got hit by the car, I was like mega fan. And I needed to know who the fuck hit Austin. And but then quickly after that, since I was so into the dirt sheets and stuff, it became who's actually the best wrestlers. And then I just, I watched a lot of TNA as an 8th grader, a freshman in high school. I was like a massive AJ fan, going back and realizing how great Michaels was in the 90s, as well as, being a huge fan of his run. Like after Austin, I was like a Jericho Benoit fan, anybody who was delivering great matches. I was a fan.
Interesting. Yeah. Cause I started off, so I'm older than you, but like I had that Hogan era, but like I got bored like in my teens, and suddenly they started pushing Bret Hart as a singles wrestler with Mr. Perfect and Shawn Michaels. And it's like, oh, this is what I want to watch now. This is what I'm into. And so so you kind of made a similar transition from those,
Oh yeah, it quickly became like the wildness of Stone Cold, the rebellion. Like, I mean, dude, Stone Cold Steve Austin and Eminem were the thing as a child, and they're both very similar in that at the end of the day, it's just fuck you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kids love that, and it probably ruined most of my life and stuff, and made me crueler than I needed to be. But I loved Austin so much. And then, just such a transition to like, oh, wow, wait, Angle is having the best matches. And, Austin hurt his neck. Austin hurt his knee. Like, you couldn't go to Austin for the barn burners anymore.
Right.
But you still wanted to see what he was doing. So there were these other guys that were kind of, dude, a lot of matches were pretty terrible in terms of like main event guys.
Oh, yeah.
Always in WWE. Like, the history of WWE is mostly the main event guys not being that great. Yeah. Which is kind of strange.
It was the crowds were so rabid at that time.
Oh, dude, that crowd, it was like
the signs. Oh my God.
Isn't it wild that when the WWE gets away from steroids and the bigger guys, they almost turned into a work rate company for a very little bit because they had to. Something that they're never known for outside of the Steamboat Savage match, I would say.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Now, as you're a big fan of AEW on your podcast, if you had to bring up, we don't talk negatives here very often, but if there were some things you could see AEW improve on, where would you like to see them make improvements? Because they don't need many.
Yeah, they don't need many. I think their timing in terms of come the end of the show, it feels very rushed. I think lately they've been sticking the landing a little better, but I mean, still just a few weeks ago, you had Suzuki and Moxley go like 6 minutes and there was a commercial break during it. I think that's a big issue. And honestly, just camera guys not catching everything.
Right.
That's a big, that's why I love New Japan. They follow the action and it comes off real and there's these shots that look like it's film or something, and then WWE, it's just very generically filmed. And then AEW, I just feel like there's moments where they completely miss. Like even this week, Pac did the backflip and sat down like Aleister Black does, and they didn't even catch Malachi Black. They didn't even catch it. It's just things like that are super important. That really bothers me. But in terms of character development, a lot of guys hate the factions, but I think you need that in the first few years because you're trying to get as many people over as possible. You're trying to see who gets over. You're trying to get everybody out there. And if you throw everybody in a faction and put them out there, then you're going to see who they like, who people like and who people don't like. And the same in terms of, the Bucks and Omega, where, it's like, oh, they're EPs or whatever. So should they have the titles? And it's like, dude, it's the second year. Yes, they should. They're the whole reason this place exists. Like, do we not remember what got us here? It's these guys. Are we not going to give them a moment at all? It wouldn't make any sense.
I like what you said about factions too. I never put it together. You're right. It is a great way to get a bunch of people over because
you got to think about it in the long run.
Yeah, because look what WWE did. Like they had that Cruiserweight Classic. Everybody was raving about. But then they brought everybody up at the same fucking time, and nobody was getting over, and it was the same stuff. And even recently, they rebranded NXT, which was awful because NXT didn't really need rebranding, but they did. But it's that was the problem. You get one guy that maybe gets over, and you're throwing 50 different people at it. It's who are these people? Why am I following all these people? You know what I mean? Unless you're a diehard of diehard, it's very hard to stay.
For sure. And they're more they should be more, I'd call them camps. I mean, they don't. And so what do you do? They're factions. But even the way New Japan, everybody's in a faction, but you almost forget. It's there's Los Ingobernables and Bullet Club, and then everybody else is on their own. But no, they're in factions. It's just not harped on, and you don't really think about it too much. So if you think about it in terms of, they're kind of a camp, when you do work at a place, you do train with people, you do go on the road with people, you do have travel buddies, and these are these people. But it's not explained like that. And so, I can't make excuses, but that's how I would like to interpret it.